When injury takes you out of the game, it's time for your team to step up. At Allina Health Orthopedics, you'll get expert care backed by a whole health system of providers with convenient locations, virtual options, and an app that gives you 24/7 access to your records, test results, and care team. You're always close to the care that you need. Schedule now at allinahealth.org/ortho.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when this finds you. Welcome to the Sound of the Loons podcast. I'm Steve McPherson, and I am so glad to once again be hanging out with Cal Williams here on the pod. Cal, it's been a minute. I think we've played like 8 games since we did a Sound of the Loons together. I feel like I had new MNUFC CEO Sherry Ballard on, and then we've just had wreckage of games recently. So you've been flying, you've been like going to Miami and stuff like that. Tell me a little bit about your whirlwind life right now.
Well, the whirlwind is a little more easy to deal with this week. Just one game this week, Steve, which is nice. The away game at Houston, which I'm sure we'll get into at some stage. Yeah, having 3 games in 7 days is never easy from a Minnesota United perspective, but then I can only blame myself for adding more work on top of that with the CONMEBOL Libertadores reaching the quarterfinal stages and what have you. So, last week was very, very busy. And I was chatting to a couple of other commentators about this in terms of what's the right amount of games you can do in a week? Because I don't remember doing 4 games in a week. I couldn't tell you the last time I did that many in 1 week. I think 3 is a healthy amount. I think 4, given the large country that we live in, I think 4 is probably a little bit too much. Mm-hmm. If you're flying around to different stadiums and different studios, I think it's going to take some getting used to if I'm going to end up doing that. But we'll wait and see. Either way, it was very enjoyable. I'm sitting here complaining, but at the end of the day, I'm getting paid to be a football commentator. So it was exhausting, but the week was sensational, Steve. I had a lot of fun with a lot of very nice people talking about football from various different continents, and it was great. It was really enjoyable. But I am glad now that we've got just this one game this week for sure. How are things with you? How was your world last week?
Just crazy. I mean, a lot of it was the Tuesday game really threw me off. Like Wednesday is a short turnaround, but Tuesday is ridiculous when you play it on Saturday, especially because you're sort of used to, Saturday, even if you have a Wednesday game, Sunday you can kind of take your foot off the gas. But I was like working on Sunday, like setting stuff up to go for the next week. And it was a little bit, it was a little bit much. And I agree. I think that, I'm sure it's even harder when you have to talk live about the game. The tighter the games come, I feel like it just dulls your sensitivity to it a little bit. And it's a little less, you're a little less able to just be present in the moment because you've seen so much of the same thing that you end up sort of going on autopilot a little bit. And I think that's it's not the way that anybody, not that I would ever accuse you of going on autopilot, but I know for me that when it gets really thick, like, if you have Open Cup games and like we're not at this season, but when that stuff happens, it's like, okay, I've seen these players play a whole lot and they're doing the stuff they always do. And it can be easy to forget that not everybody is as familiar with it as you. So sometimes I think that it's good to have a little pace, a little space, just like playing the game of soccer, like just open things up a little bit and make sure that you're approaching everything with the beginner's mind, so to speak, of Zen Buddhism is how I would like to approach it.
I think so. Yeah. I think so, Steve. I think it's important to have something fresh from time to time as well. It was a really, really busy week, to say the least. The thing that really made it difficult for me was because we were playing the game on Tuesday, which is awkward anyway, as you suggested, because of the time difference, because it was a West Coast game, and we're back to calling games off monitor in Minneapolis and St. Paul, we got off the air at, 12:30, 1 o'clock or something? Yeah. And then I had to be at the airport then at 5 or 6 a.m. the next day. So that was not fun. But again, I can only blame myself, and it is an interesting period when you've got that amount of work in that time frame. And because you have to ask yourself, at what point does quality tend to quantity, you know?
Yeah.
And then you got to be careful for sure. But look, it is what it is. I'm sitting here complaining, but at the end of the day, I'm very, very fortunate. Those watching the video version of this will see I'm soundproofing my new little studio here as well. So lots more stuff coming up, which I'm looking forward to telling people about over the course of the next few weeks. But right now, Steve, it's nice to just take a little bit of a breath and just look forward to this coming game against Houston. But I suspect we'll want to talk about the last week for sure.
Yes, we'll get to that too. I also wanted to start off this this news came through as I was prepping for the podcast. Rest in peace, Charlie Watts, drummer for the Rolling Stones. I mean, one of the best drummers in rock history and one of the coolest guys ever, to be surrounded by guys as cool as Mick Jagger and Keith Richards and kind of make them look like jerks because you're so much cooler. You're so much more laid back than those guys. Charlie Watts, amazing guy, British band, obviously. So I'm sure you have your favorite Rolling Stones tracks or albums. What's, what really does it for you when it comes to the Rolling Stones? The classics? Do you have the deep cuts? Like what are you into?
I love the Satisfaction. I can't get no satisfaction. That's just a tune, isn't it? Just an absolutely wonderful song. Couple of other ones, like Tumbling Dice, great song as well, I think. There's been a couple, Steve, but the one that I can always remember is I Can't Get No Satisfaction, I guess is the appropriate title for it. That whenever you hear the first opening few tunes on the guitar, the first few strums, you're like, oh yeah, here we go. What a tune. So obviously, rest in peace. Another music legend leaving us too soon for sure.
Yeah, I was always I've always been more of an albums guy, and one of the things that's kind of odd about the Stones is they're sort of more of a singles band in a lot of ways. For a lot of their career, it's sort of like these single songs. They don't have like not that they don't have, but like you think about the Beatles with like Rubber Soul, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper's, like these sort of different albums that define different parts of their repertoire. The Stones aren't quite the same way. They've been around forever. They had a ton of great songs. I really love that back-to-back Exile on Main Street and Sticky Fingers combination. Those two records are just incredible, featuring Mick Taylor, who's an amazing blues guitarist who was with the band for a while. And yeah, those are my go-to. So Tumbling Dice is there on Exile on Main Street. There's a ton of good stuff. Can't You Hear Me Knocking on Sticky Fingers? There's so much good stuff. So, and again,
the one I forget, sorry, so the one that I forgot of, because I think it's an obvious choice, but it's such a great song, is Gimme Shelter as well.
Yeah, for sure.
It's an absolutely amazing song. Again, one that you hear the first couple of chords and you're like, yeah, I know it's instantly recognizable, and I think if you can instantly recognize a song by the first couple of chords, you can essentially identify it as somewhat of a masterpiece, in my opinion. And Gimme Shelter is it's been used in so many different movies and everything, hasn't it? So that, but again, I don't know if that's a bit too obvious to say, but anyway, that's certainly up there as well for sure.
Well, I don't think, the thing with the Stones is that there's no, they don't have to be it's not too obvious. Their songs are so, omnipresent in culture, like you said, in movies and things like that. I mean, they're not like a subtle band. They're very good at what they do. Again, like you're saying, with Satisfaction, or you think about like Brown Sugar, like those guitar riffs that are like that sound, that open, and we're going to go a little music here, that open G sound that Keith Richards has with the suspended chords there, sort of like teasing the 4 chord out of the 1 chord. You might not know what I'm saying, but you know what I'm talking about. It's the beginning of Brown Sugar, and that has become such a signature. There are so many bands like the Black Crowes that use that. They just influenced so many bands. They're just, titans. So, they'll never be the same without Charlie Watts. At the same time, I hope they still can tour, and because I have never seen them live, but I have heard that they're incredible live still. So, rest in peace, Charlie Watts. Quick other musical shout out this week. There's a band called Deaf Heaven, which I don't presume, Cal, you're familiar with. You don't strike me as a metal guy, but Deaf Heaven have been a critical darlings of sort of not like the metal scene, but they're sort of a metal band. They had an album called Sunbather that's quite good. Very beautiful tracks, but then the singing is like this guttural howl stuff. And I've always sort of been like, yeah, it's cool, it's fine. They have a new album called Infinite Granite that just came out, and they sort of took a complete left turn with the vocals, and they become kind of croony and new wave, but still with a lot of that sort of metal energy. It's sort of tilted all the way into shoegaze, but I strongly recommend checking out the new Deaf Heaven record for you, Cal, or anybody else. It sounds big and it sounds great, and there's not too much screaming on it. There's some good singing. So that's my recommendation. And now we can talk about soccer. Should we talk about soccer? Let's do that. Let's start with, before we get to last week, let's talk about the All-Star game, the MLS All-Star game, which is happening tomorrow. Unfortunately, as news is coming out, Emmanuel Reynoso is out for that. He's been nursing a lot of injuries. He's also out for the game against Houston coming up for Minnesota United. So we won't be able to see him in the All-Star game. But it's still looking to be a really fun match, and I'm planning on watching it. I think that the concept, the MLS All-Stars versus the Liga MX All-Stars, is just going to make for some great fun television, especially with guys in MLS who are Liga MX veterans, and there's some stakes on the line. We've talked a little bit about it before, but for anybody who hasn't been tuning in, Cal, give us a little bit on what you're expecting out of the All-Star game.
I think it's going to be a really, really interesting game, Steve, because for the last, I would say, more so the last 5 years than ever before in Major League Soccer, there has been this continuation of progress for sure in the league. The argument has always been that the league is getting closer and closer to that of Liga MX, which for me still is a better league than Major League Soccer in terms of quality on the field. Off the field, I think Major League Soccer is leaps and bounds ahead of Liga MX in terms of television deals, in terms of stadiums, facilities, and what have you. But just in terms of the generic football experience, whether that's the quality on the field, the fan bases and what have you, as good as our fan bases are here, Liga MX is still there because it's been around for 50, 60 more years than Major League Soccer. Sure. So yeah, it's had time. But the suggestion is that the quality of play here in North America is catching up to Liga MX, and I have to say I agree with that. I've certainly over the last couple of years, Steve, I've watched a lot more Liga MX than I ever have done in my life, and you watch the bigger teams, like a Chivas Guadalajara or a Club America, someone like that. They are sensational. They are wonderful teams that you see consistently competing in Club World Cups. Not too long ago, they were in the Libertadores and getting to finals on a regular basis. Teams like Tigres and Puebla are brilliant. And I think there's a separation there between Liga MX and MLS. But if you were to put, an MLS team up against a mid-table team, or a team that's perhaps not vying for the title in Liga MX, I don't think there's that much difference between the top teams in MLS and the teams I've just suggested in Liga MX. The gap's getting closer. The CONCACAF Champions League is an example of that, where, again, I will always say Liga MX is better at the moment, but the gap in quality is closing for sure. And as I said, the consistency of having MLS teams reach the latter stages of the tournament continues. And it's only going to get bigger and better as well. So I'm looking forward to it, Steve, because I think it's obvious that the two leagues are trying to come together and continue a relationship that has already sparked. And this is all obviously with the 2026 World Cup in mind. And for those who live under a rock, of course, the World Cup in 26 will be hosted in Canada, the United States, and Mexico. We've got the Leagues Cup as well, which has become a tournament of a certain level of importance for certain teams as well, where it's MLS against Liga MX, and there is this rivalry starting to really, really build. And I think there's always been a rivalry, particularly from the American side of it, from the North American side of it, Steve. But now, because of the improvements of Major League Soccer, I think for the first time ever, maybe, those in Liga MX are starting to view Major League Soccer as somewhat of a threat. And there's a lot of money in this league, as well as a lot of money in Liga MX, of course. But we are seeing players coming here that perhaps would have gone to Liga MX in the past. And still vice versa as well. There's still a lot of money in Liga MX, and it's very, very attractive league. But I think more than anything, Steve, I'm just looking forward to seeing how it is from a competition point of view. The MLS All-Star game has, in years gone by, has always been a celebration of the league. And it still will be a celebration of the league, but I think there'll be a competitive edge to this one, more so than previous ones. And I only say that because of that rivalry that exists between soccer fans in the United States and Canada and Mexico. So I'm excited, Steve. I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the players from both sides. If you're asking me to pick out one individual right now, I love Gignac from Tigres Liga MX. He's a pest, and has scored goals wherever he's been. He's scored an abundance of goals in Liga MX, and I'm sure will be a handful on Wednesday. Lucas Rajan from Columbus Crew for MLS All-Stars. I'm looking forward to seeing as well. These are players that have played in Mexico and have jumped over to Major League Soccer as well. So I'm excited, Steve. I really can't wait. The fact it's in LA as well, it adds that bit of glitz and glamour to it as well. It's an appropriate geographical location for this game as well, given the culture of the city as well. So I'm excited, Steve. I always look forward to the All-Star game for sure, because as I said earlier on, it is a celebration of the league and how far it's come for sure. But it does feel as though there's something different about this one. It's just that there really is a competitive edge. So I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm hoping that it's, I think that, and this happens to a lot of All-Star games, it's very exciting to consider as it comes up to it. And then often the game starts and you're like in it for a little while. And then I feel like my attention drifts because there aren't those stakes, So I'm hoping that there's a little more bite out there on the field to keep you sort of engaged and that it's a good game. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. And as always, I always look forward to watching a soccer game that I don't have to write about. Because most of the time I'm watching Minnesota United, and so I have to spend a lot of time like thinking about what is happening and analyzing. Sometimes it's nice to just turn off and watch a game and just enjoy it for what it is. See some players I haven't seen that much as far as Liga MX, so it's going to be great. Let's move to Minnesota United stuff. And we're going to talk about this past week, these two draws, which, outwardly similar games in a lot of respects. I think there's some things that they're actually fairly different games in a lot of ways as well. I'm going to start with I don't know if this is a controversial take. I'm not sure what the soccer world feels overall. I don't find 11v10 games that good. I think they're kind of not fun to watch. I think that sometimes, to my mind, when you have, two full strength teams going at it, it's like your strength against my strength. Like I'm trying to make you do something you don't want to do. You're trying to make me do something I don't want to do. It's a clash of tactics. It's a clash of philosophies. It's a clash of talent and players. When a player is taken off, as it happened against San Jose and then again against Sporting KC, the team that loses a man just starts to kind of like sag back and hold down the fort. So much of their energy goes to preventing the other team from doing what they want. And so little of it goes to them trying to do what they want, that I feel like, and the fans begin to feel like, well, you have to come away with a result. You have to do this. You can't concede. If you concede a goal up a man, like what the hell is wrong with you? It just feels like it tilts everything in this direction that like you want this, you sort of assume what the conclusion will be. And then everything that doesn't happen. And I'm not just talking about these two games, which were obviously disappointing in a particular way, but we've seen it happen before. Minnesota United went up a man against Atlanta way back in 2017. Who's with me? Toward the end of the season, we're winning and then we're losing and then came back and won in the end. Like it's far from a foregone conclusion that it's like being up a man is just this absolute advantage. Like the other team just shuts down. And I didn't really enjoy watching either of these games just from a tactics point of view.
Yeah. So before I go into that, Steve, sorry, I'm just looking at the Liga MX All-Star roster and realize that Gignac is not in it anymore. So I'm going to change my individual player to watch, and it might be slightly controversial, but I'm going to go for Funes Mori of Monterrey, who is exceptional. So that's the one to watch. Sorry. Right. So obviously there was a real element of frustration over the course of the last two games, where Minnesota were up against two teams that went down to 10 men. When a team goes down to 10 men, it changes the infrastructure of that team. It changes the setup of that team. you've spent all week, or in this case, the last several days, prepping for how to play against the 11 men of whoever the opposition is. When it goes to 10 men, more often than not, Steve, it does force that team to maneuver into somewhat of a defensive shell, especially if they're on the road as well. Kansas City were this past weekend. And the only way that you, as the team with 10 men there, can really get the better of the opposing team with 11 is to counter press and is to get a goal through set pieces, because it's very difficult, given you've got the less man advantage, very difficult to move the ball through midfield and move it through passing lanes as you would in the past, because you've got one less man, so it's difficult. So what happened in San Jose was similar to what happened in Kansas City. Straight away, they went into a defensive shell. And I'll use the latest game as an example. When Henry Voltaire was sent off, they dropped the two higher central midfielders in Kinder and Duke much deeper to protect the back line, and they were looking to break out as quickly as they could in the wide areas, and that's what they tried to do. You'll notice there were so many times when Gabi Kinder and Cam Duke and the centre halves as well, particularly Ilie Sanchez, would get the ball and would ping the ball forward in a direct manner and thrust it forward 30, 40 yards up towards Shelton or Russell or somebody along those lines. And Pulido was forced to drop a little deeper than he usually does as well because of it. So it just made things a bit more difficult because they really sat back in their shape. Minnesota, I thought, were excellent in terms of creating chances again, which is so difficult to do when a team has to operate that defensively minded because they are down to 10 men. I thought Minnesota did so well to create the chances they did. We all know what the issue is. And we, as club employees, do not need to dance around this issue as well. We all know what the issue is. They simply don't have anybody at the moment that is confident enough in front of goal to put it away on a regular basis. And that showed again. It was, 21 shots, I think, against KC? Not the first time Minnesota have had over 20 shots in a game this year and have come out without a positive result. So it's an issue for sure. And perhaps we'll dive deeper into it later on, Steve, but the 10 men for sure can cause problems. And the natural instinct is to think, oh, well, obviously Minnesota should beat this team now because they've got a man advantage. And there's arguments towards that. There's certainly evidence to suggest that for sure. But I think particularly when the team that's down to 10 men's on the road, it's a bit more difficult. But the one that was baffling to me was San Jose, because Minnesota were set up in a certain way anyway. And again, they created chances. And again, they forced the goalkeeper into saves and they hit the woodwork and what have you, you know. And that was the one for me, because San Jose at home, it's on them to press. And they did, regardless of whether they were down to 10 men or not. But they had flashes and glimpses for sure. But that's the one that puzzled me more than anything, was the San Jose one, because, as I said, I understand if you're away from the road, if you're away from home, you're going to be more defensively minded anyway. And Kansas City did that in capital letters when they came to Allianz Field last weekend. So frustrating. I spoke to Adrian Heath this morning up at Blaine at the training facility, and I think there is an overriding sense of frustration and missed opportunity, just because against the Galaxy as well, Minnesota again had ample chances, and there's nothing you can do about it when you run to a goalkeeper who's having that kind of day. You could still be playing now and you wouldn't score, you know. It's just that, one of those games, you know. But it does feel as though they haven't gotten from the last three games what they deserve. And had they have gotten the results that they deserve, they'd be alongside LA Galaxy and Colorado now, comfortably in that top four, which is the ultimate aim. You know, they want to host a playoff game. The top four is the aim for this team. And because of some of the results that they've gotten over the last few weeks, it makes now some of the forthcoming games, and I'll start with this weekend away at Houston, it makes them so much more important than they really should have been at this stage of the season.
Yeah, it's the game against San Jose, Cal. As I sort of said, I thought that they look outwardly similar, but there's a lot that's going on between those games that are very different. One is on the road, one is at home. One is, I mean, they were both on short rest, but the San Jose one seemed particularly brutal in terms of the amount of rest. And I think you really saw that in the second half because, again, there was not that patience. There was not that sense of moving the ball around. It looked like it was just like, let's just get it forward and just like overwhelm them. But they didn't really have the energy to sort of finish that. The expected goals, again, sort of tell the tale there. I think that against San Jose, the expected goals was 1.28. So, the expected goals against SKC was 3.06. So over 3 expected goals and then coming away with nothing. You can see in those opportunities that were fantastic opportunities that went begging. That's really difficult. And like you said, I mean, I wrote it in a article earlier this week. Like, it's no secret, like finishing is the problem. It's not happening. It's a little tough to know what to do with that fact, I think, for Adrian Heath, which is probably part of what's frustrating. Because, one of the things you see, and like, obviously there's plenty of different chatter that goes on, but one thing that people will complain about is like, oh, the team that went out there, like, why would you pick this lineup? And it's like, that's who they have. Like, they don't have Lud, they don't have Fragapane, they don't have Nico Hansen. Especially not having Lud and Fragapane is so difficult. Lud has 6 goals. He's the no other player has more than 2. He is responsible for more than a quarter of the team's goals. Minnesota United is the lowest scoring team that's above the playoff line right now. Just 22 goals in the year. Fragapane, who's only played 6 games before being injured, he only took 2 shots and he scored 2 goals, like were shots that were on target. Like, having him out there, if he had been producing regularly, he could be up there with Lud. I think we could expect Fragapane to be in that 4, 5, 6 goal range. Losing those guys is particularly tough. It becomes doubly tough because the guys that they do have, you've had to move Hassani Dotson onto the left wing, which is not his best spot. He's much better in midfield, but you need him out there because you don't have a guy so far who you can say, I can trust you for 90 minutes to be out there and play on the left wing. Ethan Finley has been having a down year overall, not as productive. Obviously, Adrien Hunou is not scoring. All of those guys to some extent are leaving goals on the table, and it's making even Reynoso, who is a fantastic in terms of his assist rate and creates a lot for people. He has a ton of shots and not a ton of goals to show for it. So you've just got this front four that's like, they're not productive right now. And it's not clear. As you said, this game coming up against Houston is important, but you've also got 2 weeks on the back of this game to get guys healthy. Like, this Houston game is going to be real unusual. We're gonna get into that as we come up to that. The other thing I wanted to mention 2 other things that I was sort of taking notes as you were talking. We can't bypass the Sporting Kansas City game without mentioning Tim Melia and the delay tactics, which I do not blame Melia for. If you go down a man, you play to muck it up, and Peter Vermees has a side that is trained to do that. Like, every one of those guys knew that was the goal. When they go down a man, they're gonna play slow. They're gonna try to slow everything down as much as possible. The referee in that situation has to take care of that. Like, you have to stop that early. It's ridiculous how long Tim Melia was holding the ball out there, and the referee just let him do it. I just have to say that it was dumb. So fix that. That's what I have to say about that. I think that's what I have to say. I don't know what you have to say.
I mean, look, if it was the other way around, Steve, we wouldn't be saying anything. It's just a part of the game. It's a tactic that obviously works. It irritates, it frustrates, it annoys, and it can disrupt the rhythm of the opponent for sure. And that's exactly what it did against Minnesota. So, look, a few things, just going back to what you were saying just prior to the Melia thing. And by the way, Melia, had a great game. He made some really good saves again. And I still, for the life of me, can't believe he hasn't got a US call-up at some stage. It's probably a bit too late for him now at the age of 35. But certainly those first few years, sort of 2016, 17, and he didn't get into the Gold Cup roster. I thought that was very strange. But anyway, that's another debate for another day. Dotson on the left-hand side, obviously not his natural position. I understood it against KC, and here's why. Because Kansas City, prior to the red card, they were playing a singular six in Voltaire. And when you play a singular six and you've got the two other central midfielders ahead of you operating in an 8 role, when you've got a singular six, you've got space either side. And because of the way Minnesota play with the overlapping fullbacks, and when all bodies are available and healthy and the inverted wingers, it works. Against a singular six, it does because there's space either side. I think if Minnesota had a full complement of players, if Robin Lod and Franco Fragapane were available, I think it would have caused them chaos. And it did already. When you think back to the playoff game last year, Kevin Molino was playing on that left-hand side in that inverted role, and he caused chaos at Children's Mercy Park that day. So I understood why Dotson was placed out there for the KC game, because he is favoured on the right foot. He will naturally tuck in anyway because he's not a wide player. And when you've got Chase Gasper overlapping on that far side, again, him tucking in to pull the opposing fullback inside is a value anyway. So I understood it there, Steve. The last couple of games, though, in terms of scoring goals, it's obviously an issue for Minnesota at the moment. And I'm not suggesting they don't have an answer already on the team, because I think if you give him enough service, I think Adrien Hunou can score a couple of goals in this league. My issue with it, Steve, is, and I've said this on several different platforms now, I'm not convinced he's a centre forward. I remember saying on this platform, on this very podcast, when it was clear that the signing was about to be made or had been made. I remember saying that, yep, he's going to be the pressing forward that they're looking for. So let me retract that and let me go back to a couple of weeks prior to this. So when Minnesota, when I had gotten wind that Hunou was a potential signing and that it was a fee had been agreed and there was movement, straight away I went and had a look online and looked at some videos and what have you, and instantly got excited because there's no real lowlights on YouTube and what have you either. So you only see the good side of people. Whilst there was evidence of him playing in a front four and a front two, and clearly he can cause some problems in front of goal, there wasn't much in terms of the build-up. There wasn't much in terms of where he operates naturally. When you do a bit more research and you go back and have a look, the suggestion before when he signed was, oh, well, he's only got 38 goals in 7 seasons. He can't really be that much of a goal scorer. That's because of two things. Number one, he was playing on the left-hand side of a 4-3-3 and also a 4-2-3-1. And then when he was playing centrally, he was playing as a supporting striker. And what I mean by a supporting striker, Steve, is somebody who plays off of a target man, somebody who plays off of the central forward, the focal point, the number 9. And I think, honestly, that may be where he's best suited. And I say this for a number of different reasons. His movement in the box, for me, it looks slightly forced. And by the way, I'm not saying he can't work here, by the way, because I think he can, but I'm just saying what I've seen over the last couple of games. There was a game, I think it was the Galaxy game, when he came off for Juan Agudelo. And it was obviously late in the second half, and Gasper put a ball across, and instantly Agudelo latched onto it at the near post, and I think just poked it wide. And I thought to myself, that positioning and that movement is reminiscent of what a centre forward should be doing, because that's Agudelo's natural position. He is a centre forward. I know he can play out wide, and he's played out wide successfully for the Revs and into Miami and what have you, but he is naturally a centre forward, and he has that natural instinct of what to do and what position to take up when you're inside the box. A supporting striker is not necessarily that person. And the supporting striker will tend to operate on the cusp of the penalty area. And the game when Minnesota were away at Vancouver in Salt Lake, myself and Kendra were obviously fortunate enough to be in the stadium. And I remember Adrian Heath screaming at Hunou, telling him to get in between the centre halves, telling him to be in the box. If that was his natural game, that wouldn't need to be said. Okay, sometimes you can pull yourself out of position. Sometimes you drop deeper to get a touch as a centre forward and whatnot. But it just doesn't look natural to me. His positioning doesn't look natural to that of a centre forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wonder if this is the signing that people said. So, like I said, when I had seen all of this, I wasn't convinced that he was a centre forward. And I went and spoke to a few people about him, and certainly people on the staff at Minnesota, and they had all said to me that they think it's the centre forward that they're looking for and what have you. He'll press and what have you. So I said, okay, well, you guys know more about the game than I do, so I'll go with what you're saying. And I have to say I disagree at the moment. I think the original plan was probably to have Unu playing off of Avila, and Avila didn't work. So it's a problem right now because, and I feel sorry for Unu as well, Steve, because he's essentially been asked to play a game that's not natural to him, and it's making him not look particularly pleasant at the moment. And I feel sorry for him, and also as well, Steve. What I have to absolutely add as well is I felt sorry for him about 5 or 6 games ago when it was clear Reynoso was far too deep, and he wasn't providing the service for Unu. Unu makes fabulous secondary runs and sacrificial runs, but I think I just don't think he's a natural centre forward. The way that I've seen him over the last 10, 11 games, Steve, it just doesn't seem like he's a natural centre forward. I'm not saying he can't learn and become a threat in front of goal, but right now it seems awfully forced, and I wonder if that's going to continue to be a problem for Minnesota United. I will say, Steve, I do think once he gets a goal, I hope he becomes a bit more confident in himself, because he is lacking sharpness, he is lacking confidence at the moment, and I do think it's one of these things that if he does score a goal, maybe he'll be a little more confident in himself, because right now he is looking a little unsure of himself, and things just don't seem very natural. So we'll wait and see. I know they believe in him big time. They spent enough money on him. They believe in him for sure. You don't spend that amount of money if you don't think someone's any good. So we'll wait and see, Steve. But I've never seen a centre forward who is as in need of a goal as Adrien Unu. And I say that phrase, I don't say it lightly. I say centre forward in need of a goal. I'm not convinced he's a centre forward. And it'll be interesting to see how Minnesota plan to conquer this issue, because it's not something you can fix overnight at all.
Mm-hmm. Let's we're going to continue that with in the lens of the Houston game. But first, when injury takes you out of the game, it's time for your team to step up. At Allina Health Orthopedics, you'll get expert care backed by a whole health system of providers with convenient locations, virtual options, and an app that gives you 24/7 access to your records, test results, and care team. You're always close to the care you need. Schedule now at allinahealth.org/ortho. Yeah, I think with regards to Unu, I sort of wonder if there's not some of the same, I think I've talked before about the comparison to Lod coming in his first season, having come out of, sort of being off and then having to get up to speed really quickly, and Unu having some of that same thing. And then now, Lod also had that thing of playing on the left side, which he was like, I can do it. I've done it. And it just didn't look great. It's like, it was fine, but it wasn't awesome. And then he moved to the right side, and then he's looked spectacular, and in his false nine role as well. If there's not some of that same thing in both ways with the new going on, that he sort of needs a full off season to kind of, settle in, and, it's just going to take a while. I don't know if it clicks at some point during this season with regards to that sort of comfortability. And then positionally, can he play? Is there a way for him to play that secondary striker role? Let's talk about that possibility with regards to Houston, because again, we've got this game coming up against Houston. No Emmanuel Reynoso, so you have no clear number 10 sort of to pull the strings. You're going to be missing Bakai Diwasi because he's out with yellow card accumulation. You've got 2 weeks coming after this to sort of, get everybody rested and recovered. So obviously there's no, Adrian has said this before with regards to different players. Why rush a player back for one game if you can get them more rest on the other end of it? I'm sure that's part of what's going into the calculation for Reynoso. As far as I know, Reynoso has no, extreme injury. It's like it's an accumulation of bumps and bruises and sort of getting, ganged up on. So why not give him this time to rest? Houston is a very hard place to play. We've seen it. It's just an unpleasant place to be. It's August in Texas, and it's going to be, brutal. So the question to my mind is, what do you do here? Do you go to, we've seen the 4-3-3 as a formation shift that's a little more conservative. I think it also plays into some strengths right now. I think if you're looking at the midfield with Ozzy looks pretty good, Hassani, Will, Jan, Jacori, they've all at different points looked really good, better than that front four. Why don't you put your strength into the midfield rather than worrying about that? Maybe you can play Unu out on the left wing, maybe you put Patrick Weah at forward, which would be crazy. But again, what are your options? Do you go to a 4-4-2? I don't think Minnesota United's ever really straight up played a 4-4-2. We've seen 4-1-4-1. You've seen it function in some ways like that, but you've rarely seen, if you have Weah and Unu both out there as forwards. What about the 3-5-2? That was another formation that was played to some acclaim by the team a couple of years back. I don't even know if you really have three full-on center backs. You probably have to then play Jukka Raitala and Brent and Boxall as your three center backs. So I don't know. Maybe you play Justin McMaster. Both McMaster and Weah came on late. Obviously, I think they have qualities that could be good. I think it's a little tough to entrust a full 90 minutes necessarily, and you don't have a lot of other options beyond that in terms of attacking players. But what do you think you do in a game like this, going to Houston, Cal, where there's sort of no tomorrow and there's also all tomorrow? It's like this one game that sort of sits on an island because you've got this 2 weeks off after that. What do you do with this?
Well, because of the limitations, obviously Minnesota will have to adjust slightly, as you mentioned, no Emmanuel Reynoso, which will force them into a different look. It's, 2:45 on a Tuesday, Steve. So I was up at training today, but there was certainly no indication of any lineup today.
Right.
Far too early for that. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if Adrian Heath went with a 4-3-3 on the road, which he has done in the past. And it wouldn't surprise me if the midfield trio is, something like a Will Trapp, Jan Gregush, Ozzy Alonso, or Jacori Hayes, or something along those lines. Minnesota have an abundance of central midfielders. That's not an issue. That's an area that you are absolutely okay with. You mentioned Dibasi will be unavailable due to yellow card accumulation, so Brent Coleman's the obvious candidate to slot back in, as he should do. I thought he was incredibly unfortunate to not play against Kansas City this past weekend. And you would assume he'd be alongside Boxall, with Métanire on the right, Gasper on the left, and that backline would be set. The question mark continues to be in attack. What do you do? If it is a 4-3-3, it wouldn't surprise me if he had Ethan Finlay on the right-hand side, Adrien Unu as the focal point at centre forwards. And then on the left-hand side is the big question. Does he go with Juan Agudelo, or does he give Justin McMaster the opportunity, So that's the million-dollar question there, is what he does. If it was me, Steve, I must admit, I would see this as an opportunity to continue with a 4-2-3-1, but perhaps have Unu in the deeper role and sort of have it as a 4-4-2 as well in transition. Mm-hmm. And you have Unu underneath Agudelo, and you play, I can see him still playing Dotson out wide, because Houston with a 4-3-3 will again continue to play that singular six, which, as I said earlier on, can be beneficial. So I could see Dotson out wide on the left. I could see Finlay on the right. I would go Unu underneath Agudelo, playing as a supporting striker. I could see that for sure. That would be what I would do anyway. But I'm no soccer tactician, and I'll be interested to see, Steve, because again, I asked Adrian Heath earlier on, and I asked Michael Boxall as well, given the results over the course of the last few weeks, that there is importance on this Houston game that there really shouldn't be. But there is, and because there is expectation at this franchise now. And Houston, to my knowledge, last time I looked, they were unbeaten, or they hadn't won, in 13 games. They're undergoing a bit of a torrid spell. So there is expectation to go and win this kind of game. It doesn't matter about the Heat. And Adrian Heath will say that as well. The Heat can be used as an excuse. Yeah. So I'm interested, Steve. But the good thing is that even with the limitations that Minnesota have, they do have options. No Robin Lod, Reynoso, Fragapane, to my knowledge, all. I'd be surprised if any of them were involved. I think the thought process there is that they'll give them the extra week in terms of recovery, given the international break is next week. And why wouldn't you? There's still a long way to go in the season. So we'll see. I can see Adrian going with a 4-3-3. But like I said, I think it's a good opportunity to try Unu playing off of a centre forward. And given the limitations again, Agudelo would lead the line for me. But we'll wait and see. It wouldn't surprise me if it's a 4-3-3, Steve. It'll be interesting. 4-3-3 is what he's opted to go with on the road in the past. It's a very counter-pressing formation, and I can see them having to be a little more reserved from time to time because it's an away game. And I know I just said the heat can be used as an excuse, and it can be, but the fullbacks will have to be reserved because of it. But I think it'll be 4-3-3. But as I said, Steve, if it was up to me, I would go with a 4-2-3-1 and have Abunu in that secondary supporting striker role.
I like that idea. I think I agree that I think there's the 4-3-3 is probably the slightly better bet based on past experience. And again, obviously you can say you can't use the heat as an excuse, but it's hot. it's going to be brutal. And there's just something about playing a little more conservatively that probably benefits you. Again, Houston's a hard place to win, no matter what the expectations are. Like getting a draw would be great. But I mean, as Adrian always says, they'll take a point on the road, but that point's going to feel terrible because you've just taken, a pair of points from two games that feel like you should have been able to win. So that's tough. I like the idea of the 4-2-3-1 with sort of a kind of a functional 4-4-2 in some ways. And I think maybe it would be really a chance for Unu to show some of what he can do, dropping a little deeper, staying a little more on the edge of the penalty box. I think it could be good for him. And personally, I would want to see McMaster on the left. I think it's one of those situations where there's been times in the past where Adrian has, he's rarely going to throw, unless you're talking about international friendlies, Open Cup, something like that. He's not going to throw in a bunch of guys who don't play regularly together. But he is, sort of surgically chosen, okay, this guy, maybe he's not quite ready, but let's see how he does. And he'll put one guy out there that's a little bit unusual, and see how that fits in with the team. And this could be the chance for Justin McMaster to do that. I think it's the thing that DJ Taylor did earlier this season, like to step in and play and do well. And then he sort of held his spot for a little while. I think it's a chance for McMaster, who showed some great stuff early on in the season, to get out there and show what he's got. It's going to be a fun game. It's one I'm glad I'm not traveling to Houston to do anything with. So,
yeah, yeah. Look, it's going to be interesting. It's never easy going down to Houston, but I think given their run at the moment, I think this has got to be viewed as an opportunity for Minnesota United for sure. And as I said, given the fact that the way the last couple of results have gone, there's a bit more emphasis on this game than there really should be at this stage of the season. So we'll wait and see. But if this team wants to be a top four team, if they want to have a home playoff game come season's end, I think these are the types of games they've really got to win.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us for the 155th Sound of the Loons podcast presented by Allina Health Orthopedics. Be sure to leave us a nice review on iTunes, or at the very least a 5-star rating, and follow the team on Twitter at MNUFC. I keep forgetting that I put at the very least a 5-star rating as like a joke, and now I just say it. I'm like, I don't even know if anybody's ever left us a rating, so I should check in on that. I think we've gotten some good feedback. I'm sure your dad gave us a 5-star rating, so
always does. Yes.
Thanks, Glenn. You can follow Cal at CalWilliamsCom and me at Steve Enteris. Apologies as always to Richard Wagner, and remember, there's only one person in this whole world like you. People can like you exactly as you are.